The first order of business is LAPD officer and president of Protect California, Robert Harris. We're going to talk about some of the stories, proposed law to restrict the use of deadly force by the police you just heard about, reported there in the news. Robert, thank you for joining us.
Hey, how are you? Thank you for having me.
So we just heard some testimony regarding this matter. What is being suggested, and what's your response to it?
Well, it really comes down to, in the simplest terms, approaches that are going to be, that are being supported to address the police use of force issue in the state, specifically when and how deadly force is used. And those two approaches are kind of opposed to each other. One is a punitive approach, which is what Assembly Bill 392 seeks to do. It seeks to address the issue of deadly force after the fact in a punitive style. And then there is a competing approach that is preventative in nature through Senate Bill 230, which is seeking to implement strong agency policies surrounding use of force, when to use it, de-escalation tactics, and then providing the quality training necessary to strengthen those policies. So those are really the two different approaches that are being taken legislatively.
I'm guessing you support the latter.
You would guess correct. I think law enforcement as a group, as a coalition, we had some tough and honest conversations at the end of last legislative session, and we are absolutely committed to, we are absolutely sincere in our endeavor to see police uses of force reduced even further than they already have been. I mean, there was a 40% decline in the number of fatal officer-involved shootings between 2015 and 2018, and we want to strive to see that number continue to go down. And we are fully vested and committed in taking the preventative approach and taking a holistic approach and looking at strengthening and implementing mandated use of force policies throughout the state, addressing mental health issue, which I think is huge. Law enforcement has kind of been placed on the front lines to deal with individuals suffering mental health crises and oftentimes leads to uses of force. So if we can begin to address that on the front end instead of the back end, I think we'll continue to see the number of uses of force, specifically deadly force incidents, decrease.
You know, there's a Senate bill, was it 640, Leeann? I forgot what it was. You help me with this. That to expand gravely disabled, so people can be taken away before they get to that point with you. So please support that Senate bill.
Yes,
please.
We are looking at supporting anything and everything that we can that can minimize and reduce the chance of an officer having to use force prior to it ever getting to that point. So,
well, that will do it. If you can put somebody into mental health services because of horrible symptoms, but not yet at this point holdable, it will change what is holdable, and you won't have to deal with it. They'll get better. They will go to where they're supposed to go, which is mental health hospital.
And Robert, can I ask you the question, how do police officers who we rely on a daily basis to put on the uniform and strap a gun and whatever else that they have to, protect us and keep our cities and our communities safe on our behalf, and to know that, they're asked and tasked with making life and death situations in split seconds, and that's a very under high stressful situations. And then to know that, if some of these bills go through, that, you're going to be punished afterwards, when it's, hindsight's always 20/20, when, at the time, of course, I'm sure my husband's in the military, so, there's a lot of similarities, but there, the last thing a police officer wants to use, I know, for the most part, is force, and deadly force at that. But how do police officers feel if they're being put under that pressure where every time that they make a move, it's going to be looked at and, you're going to be punished if it's not perfect, when they know that under a stressful situation, you're making the best choice that you're making at that exact moment under those circumstances?
Well, first, I appreciate your husband's service, so you can pass that along for me.
Well, thank you. We appreciate yours as well.
Talking to our membership specifically, the Los Angeles Police Protective League, we represent about 10,000 rank-and-file police officers from the rank of lieutenant down to the patrolman. And there is some apprehension about this bill. And I think what the public doesn't always recognize or is made aware of is that we are the consummate professionals. And as such, we are always looking at what we do and finding ways to improve it. Specifically in Los Angeles, we are decades ahead of where some agencies in the state are. One of our core values is quality through continuous improvement, so we're always looking for that. But it is we have been asked as a law enforcement profession to take on more and more responsibilities. We shoulder the weight of that responsibilities, and we're beginning to deal with things that are societal problems, not police problems, but we try to do it in the most professional way that we can. But there's a lot of apprehension about whittling away and undermining the Supreme Court's standard that's, almost 4 decades old, and replacing that with something that is just not humanly possible to achieve in those split seconds. But we feel like we all have a shared goal in that we want to see the number of uses of force reduced. We want to see the number of officer-involved shootings reduced. And we firmly believe that the preventative approach is the way to do that. And we have been trying to work in good faith for months since the end of last session to try and meet with them and find some common ground to move on the preventative aspect. And we just haven't been able to get there. The supporters of AB 392 are really vested in the punitive approach, and the studies that we have seen, the studies that we've read, the experts agree there are really 4 things that have actually been proven to reduce.
All right, let's go. The 4 things are: reduce the numbers of high-risk events through better training for public safety officers, better training for. You guys are you mean each community better trained? Is that the idea?
Each agency better trained. Each agency.
Correctly. So there's the uniform levels of training, which I always thought was an important thing, but that costs money. Okay, some organizations may not be able to afford that, or have alternatives to lethal force, like LA does. Beanbags and rubber bullets, and all that kind of stuff. Tasers.
Sure.
All right. Establish minimum standard for use of force, de-escalation policies. I don't see anybody can disagree with that. Prevent high-risk individuals from access to guns. This is, again, why this is something not universally accepted. It's hard for me to get my head around. But, again, some gun advocates, Leeann, maybe you could advocate the gun side. If somebody has even a high probability of hurting themselves or somebody else, even a modest probability, for a period of time, we should be able to restrict their access.
Absolutely. We're all for that. Yes.
And then this is the one I don't understand, though, which is reduce violent crimes and the number of arrests. Well... Yeah, no kidding. I mean, I don't understand. I understand that. Robert, help me with that one. Yeah.
Well, you would think that reducing violent crime would be self-evident, but it isn't always. Strategies employed by agencies to try and accomplish that sometimes come under fire. Los Angeles is no stranger to that, as we have the discussion about the removal or the standing down of Metro in South LA, and then watching the aftermath of what happens in those communities when you remove police resources. So while I think you and I would agree reducing violent crime seems to be pretty clear-cut, it's not always clear-cut when it comes to elected officials. So
the other thing is reducing the number of arrests. In California, the way we do that is declare more and more things not crimes. Therefore, less arrests.
Correct.
Oh, hey, we've done
God.
it. So that's what kind of made me shudder with that particular 4th lever that needs to be pulled. It's like I'm afraid of what the representatives will do. They'll make nothing a crime. Hey, guess what? There'll be less arrests.
Right. No, you're true. But I mean, again, I think if the starting point is that human life is valuable, the loss of life is a tragedy, well, then why don't we begin to look at things on the preventative side that lead up to some of these incidents and try and take care of those so those incidents never happen, so that we don't have to suffer through the loss of human life. And
a lot of that societal, a lot of that society and family and all those things that start with the home, and that's wide-ranging problems.
What is the headwinds you're coming up against?
The headwinds that we're coming up against is when you look at police use of force, specifically deadly force, there are kind of 2 sides to that. There is the emotional side. There is, the feelings of tragedy and loss, all appropriate on both sides. But then there's the objective side. There's the fact-based side. There's the reality side. And where we're not getting traction is trying to insert facts and data so that we can make decisions legislatively and internally that are as objective as possible to achieve the goal. But when decisions are grounded and rooted in nothing but emotion, it's very hard to cut through that and to latch on to something that has been proven to work. And so those are the headwinds that we're coming up against.
Hold on. Are you saying that there may be some legislators that are maybe not wanting to hear data and facts that you're presenting?
Yeah, it's ideology, Leeann. Here it is again.
Exactly. I'm just wanting to be clear. It doesn't fit with the ideological approach, therefore facts don't matter.
Because
police are killing innocent people and they want them to stop, and we're going to punish them for every time they use lethal force, whether it was rightly done so or not.
Yes, I mean, I can tell you in a number of the meetings that I've been in, what we're presented with is, look, there is an epidemic of police violence occurring in California, and we are 37% higher than the national average. And so Protect California has done is we've actually done myth versus fact leave behinds that we leave in the offices, and it's a myth. California is actually 5% below the national average per capita. And there is not an epidemic of police violence. There's been a 40% decrease in the number of fatal officer-involved shootings. And last year, in 2018, there were 114 fatal officer-involved shootings, and only 2 of those were with somebody that was not armed with a weapon. Obviously, one was the highly publicized Stephon Clark, and then the other one was the tragic death of the Trader Joe's manager. So when the legislators are latched on to hashtags and Twitter posts, and this is where they're deriving their information from, it's very hard to cut through and have an objective conversation, because in their minds, there's just this rampant issue that's happening out there. And, we're trying to spend our time cutting through those myths and giving them facts, and then we are continually driving home that there is a way for law enforcement to support preventative measures so that we don't have to get to a point where we use force.
That's the key thing, right? I mean, is to have non-lethal alternatives and to have the mental health thing dealt with and have proper training.
Trust me, I'm sure the last thing a cop wants to get into is a lethal shootout.
Oh, Jesus!
I mean, trust me.
But the last thing that that I kept the thing I kept seeing when we used to report all this stuff on HLN was the tremendous inconsistency in the levels of training and the level of options, non-lethal options, in law enforcement facilities across the country. And I'm guessing you're saying across California it's similarly inconsistent. Is that about right? Yes. Yeah. It's similarly inconsistent, and whether. Oh no, go ahead. I'm sorry, Dr. Well, I was going to say it costs money to bring them up to LA. Spent a bunch of money on training and really made it a priority. And almost every little town has to field their own force, and they may not be able to afford this. It's going to be weird. It's going to be maybe the state can spend some of that money they have of ours to do this. I don't know. Well. It's funny that you say that, because one of the things Protect California has been driving home as a coalition of law enforcement agencies and some trade associations is we want to hold stakeholders accountable so that their rhetoric is matched with resources. And AB 392, in our opinion, is an excellent example of this. You want to implement or change the Supreme Court decision on how deadly force is used and how it's judged, but there's nothing in there about how you're going to retrain every single police officer throughout the state to do that. So, it's how the state has dealt with the mental health issue. I mean, it's not even mandated through post that police officers get ongoing training in how to deal with individuals suffering a mental health crisis. Now, a lot of agencies like LAPD, we take on that burden and we do it and we train our officers. But these guys are on the front lines and they are putting their principles. I guess they're matching their service with their actions. I mean, they put their lives on the line every day. And so if our officers are going to do that, then why can't we get our electeds to at least match their rhetoric with some resources too? We're talking to Robert Harris. Again, he is from Protect California, where he is president. In addition to having been a 19-year LAPD veteran, Robert served as U.S. Army as a sergeant, and we thank you for that.
Yeah, thank you.
ProtectCA.com is where you can find out more. Anywhere else you want to send people to get behind this? No, Protect California, to the website, ProtectCA.com is the place to go to where all the information is, and there's links there on how they can support our efforts. All right, Robert, thank you so much.
Thank you.
I appreciate it. Thank you, guys. Have a good afternoon.